Hello, Abnormal Investigations. I decided to do a 2 video drop today. Number one is because I got a really good one out of Australia, and number two, these helped me in bringing Hunter home. Y'all have really stepped up. I've got a lot of views. Our subscribers are really up right now on YouTube and on Facebook. I think today alone we had over 50 new subscribers. So everything's looking really good. Everything's up and up. And hey, we're going to get Hunter home. And I want to drop another video for y'all today. It's going to be a 2-day video drop. What do you think about that? Smash that like button, guys. It don't cost a thing, but it sure pushes our algorithm and puts us out there. That way people see us and they know to subscribe and to watch our content. So here you go. It's kind of a long one. Hello there. I would like to start out my encounter by telling you a bit about myself first. I live in New South Wales, Australia. Anyway, my encounter took place in October 2014. I was 16 years old at the time and in my last year of primary school. For the school camp that year, we would spend 2 days down at Mago Gold Rush Colony, an old preserved gold rush colony from the time of the gold rush in Australia. Since at the time we were learning about British colonization and our early history, it's located a few miles south of Bateman's Bay, and it's surrounded by the bush. In Australia, we call the woods the bush. The bus ride was fun, but taxing, as we lived in a Wollongong, which is a nearly 3 hours north of Bateman's Bay. When we finally arrived late in the afternoon, they sorted us into our cabins. My friends and I were put into a cabin closest to the tree line and bridge leading from the living quarters to the caravan park to the colony itself. My friends Brody, Liam, and I hope I pronounced this name right, Lachlan, David, and Cohen had packed our PSPs, board games, and David brought his small pinball machine. I bought him for his birthday. We all also were stocked up on sweets and snacks and planned to stay up long into the night having fun. After dinner, we made to sit at our formal partner and listen to the local Aboriginal elder named Sam. I sat on a log with my then girlfriend at the time, Gemma. Sam told us many things. He went into great depth on the British impact on the Aboriginals of the area, and they brought troubles of their own with them here. He then asked if we liked scary stories. Everyone excitedly yelled, of course, yes. Sam then told us that the Aborigines had many creatures from their stories they believed in. And I'm hoping I'm getting this right, guys. The Bunyip and the Yawa, Moa, and the Yahoo. It sounded like that, and the Yowie were a few he mentioned. His face grew dark and grim before saying that the British brought monsters of their own with them. He said one of the beasts in particular that all of us kids would recognize was the European werewolf. One boy laughed and said werewolves aren't real. They're just cool myths made up by movie makers. The old man looked over at the boy and said, I pray you never meet one yourself. As cliché and silly as it sounded, he looked serious and concerned, which only made me feel unsettled. We were told to go to the cabins to unwind. It took many of the rowdier cabins a few hours to unwind, but soon it was just us. One of the teachers, Miss R, had to come down because Liam had broken a light bulb by accident. So she had to take him back to stay with the teachers because the assistant principal had also gone with us. So she had to follow the school's protocol, leaving only Cohen, Brody, Lachlan, David, and myself. Lachlan had been hit by an extreme homesickness, which had him crying, and so Brody, being the legend he is, kept his company and comforted him by telling him, It's all going to be all right, Lachlan. It'll be fun. We all had a set of double bunk beds. lining the cabin up in the bathroom. At the back, it was like a flat almost, being a double cabin. Another group had one next door to us, but we only had two windows, one in between my bunk and Lachlan and the Brody's bunk bed, and the other above the toilet. I know, a silly place to have it, but you would understand when you got a lot of people in there using the bathroom that it needs to be aired out. The toilet window had a shutter, and we kept it open for the light from the outside gazebo to shine in so we didn't make a mess throughout the night. You could see along the outside wall to the porch and the other window. At around 1 a.m. it began pelting down rain. Lachlan was still crying, David was playing his PSP with his headphones in, and Cohen and I were talking. I needed to get to the toilet, and as I stood there doing my business, I heard Lachlan scream. At the window, some dog is looking at us. I then glanced out the window to the side of the cabin as I saw it. I see a huge black beast covered in fur. It appeared to be squatting on two legs which were bent back like a Hollywood werewolf. Its arms were down to its knees with long bony fingers that ended in claws. The length of the steel nails, it had a semi-muscular build and the head of a dog, but there was something wrong with it. It had the maw of a wolf and small ears on its head. Its shaggy mane and wet black nose dripped from the downpour outside. It had placed one of its hands on the window. It was looking in too, outstretched its huge hand, and scraped down the glass with those claws. It appeared to have a mischievous look on its face, enjoying the fear it was getting from Lachlan. I began to slowly close the shutter of the bathroom window while not taking my eyes off the beast. However, the blinds made a surprisingly loud squeak. At once the beast turned to face me. I wished I had not done that. The beast stared at me. That was when I got a break, and I got a great look at its face. I tremble every time I think of its face. Words cannot describe the look it gave me. It had eyes that were bright amber, that seemed to reflect the light from the light outside. They had a glow to them like the embers of a fire. It slowly began to bare its teeth at me in a sinister-looking snarl. Saliva and rain dripping from its exposed mouth. It let out a low growl so deep I could feel it reverberate in my chest. I was completely frozen with fear, and I could feel myself lost in its eyes. Its gaze was full of hate and rage, but I felt a strange sense of curiosity. I wanted to see what it would do next, even if it tried to get at me. It then ran its long, razor-like claws down the side of the wooden wall of the cabin. All the while it didn't break eye contact with me. I could see the black claws glistening in the rain and the light from the gazebo. Then I saw a flashlight bobbing behind it, and the teachers must have heard Lachlan screaming because all of them came down. The beast then glared angrily in their direction before giving me one last look. It almost appeared to grin at me with those sinister teeth of its. It then got down on all fours before taking off at an alarming speed, kicking up bark chips everywhere. I raced to the window it was at before and watched the beast bound toward the colony and over the bridge, all the while kicking up dirt and grass behind it. It was super fast. David had been playing his PSP with his headphones in, and hadn't heard or seen any of this, and Brody stayed on the bottom bunk, which he chose to stay put in. As Cohen stayed in his, Lachlan was now sobbing hysterically at this point, and teachers unlocked the door and burst in. Lachlan kept saying there was a monster at the window, but Miss Chapman didn't believe him. She turned to me and asked, "Did you see a monster?" I pointed at the scratches on the window, saying a word, and moved past her to climb to my bunk. She then said she'd find the little troublemaker who did this, to which I replied, "Good luck." She clearly couldn't see the side and the width of the scratches, or she refused to buy that something did that. As in Australia, we don't have big cats or bears, so it was nothing according to her. Most of my friends managed to sleep, even Lachlan, but lay there wondering if it'll be back. what it wanted. I then closed the shutter to the window above my head and soon drifted off to sleep. I woke up last. I had slept through a lot. Liam had come back and was being rowdy and messing about with David. David was chasing him up and down the cabin in nothing but an Iron Man mask and underpants and screaming like a maniac, and David was quite out of shape, so you imagine how absurd he looked. Lachlan, Brody, and Cohen were quiet. We didn't speak a word until we got changed for the day. That day we were taken out on a tour, one of the mines that had been restored, and David and I decided to split off the group and explore the colony ourselves as wandered through the town. He couldn't help but wonder why there were claw marks on some of the walls of the old buildings. I knew what I had left them as the previous night. We knew what left them in our cabin. We then decided to check out the back of the barber, which was immediately backed by thick forest. That's when a foul odor filled our noses. David said we should follow it to its source. I was a little reluctant but curious if we would run into our hairy friend again. But what we saw made me vomit. In a clearing not too far from the barber's back lot was a mangled mess of what was once a kangaroo. Its belly had been torn into, some of its entrails spilled out onto the ground. It was at the base of the large gum tree. Its back was broken, going off. This I suspected it had been slammed into the tree. But the most disturbing thing of all was the fact that it had no head, as if it had messily been ripped off. The worst of all, the head was nowhere to be found, David said. What the F could have done this? I urged him we should get the hell out of there, and we did, rejoining the group, who were down the road at the blacksmith. I told him what we saw the last night and how I missed it. I told him how Liam used to own a book called Werewolves, Vampires, and Zombies, which contained a section on cryptids. In particular, I told David about the Beast of Bray Road and how I had looked and read so much about it, and the similar to the drawing in the book. He wasn't skeptical at all. Given the slaughtered kangaroo, soon the guide led us to the barber with the class, and not long everyone began complaining about the smell. So the guide discovered the handiwork that the beast had done to the poor kangaroo. Then he told us to go to the old schoolhouse and church before gold panning soon. I saw a few other workers meet up with him, and they discussed what to do with it. They then disappeared to clean up the monstrous masterpiece. David and I, during lunch, go explore the caravan park and stumble upon the largest gaggle of geese we'd ever seen. There was at least 30 in total. These geese were vicious and roamed the whole property. Now these geese will be important soon. After the night of formal dance practice, we return to the cabin and unwind for bed. Before it got dark, I closed the outside steel shutters on the windows, and we lock everything down, even closing the blinds. I locked the door, and with the help from Lachlan, we barricaded the door with the wardrobe. Near end of the Cohen's bunk, Liam, not understanding why we were doing this, asked us, "What on earth are we doing?" I simply told him that the lock was busted, and he was always a skeptic. We all drift off to sleep fairly fast, to the sounds of the cicadas and the crickets, but I was slowly awakened at 4 a.m. by a subtle bump. The sound of the nightlife had ceased. Not even the early birds that you'd hear this time were silent. As the thumping continued, and the thump soon became the screeching of steel, as I knew the beast had returned for us. However, it knew we'd taken seriously, and it was not pleased with this. I look over at Lachlan, who's already awake, clutching his Swiss Army knife. I begin to shake and feel nauseous, thinking the thing would easily smash its way in here, in its pure rage, and ragdoll us like it did the kangaroo. I close my eyes and begin to pray. I recite the Lord's prayers and ask for aid, and soon I can hear it growling at something, and the scratching and pounding ceased. I then hear a distinctive sound of geese. I then hear a deafening roar. Before it comes, the fluttering and the whacking sounds of the cries of the geese grew louder, as I heard the beast let out another roar of anger. I heard it growling and snarling, as I could hear it then disappear into the bush, as the sounds of the hucking of the geese and the beast growling began to fade away. Everyone was now awake from the commotion. Liam asked what happened. I told him I didn't know. After unlocking everything at 5:30 a.m. and unbarricading the door, Lachlan and I decided to examine the outside of the cabin. And oh boy, it was a mess. Claw marks down the shutter, indentations in the wood from its pounding and pounding bark away, everywhere. Feathers all over the ground with a few dead geese. 2 geese were dead, with large gashes across their chests, and another looked like it had been slammed into the ground until it was pulp. We moved the geese away because we knew we'd get questioned for the damage, and the dead geese wouldn't help us, so we dumped them into the creek, separating the cabins from the colony, and we then began to pack our things. Later that morning we stopped at the Mogo Zoo, and shortly after we were on our way home. We don't talk much about what had happened on the bus home. The past 2 nights had been very traumatic for some of us, and Liam and Brody reminded us that they were skeptical. Even though the evidence of the creature was there, a few months passed and I'm starting high school. During that time I become obsessed with a game called Skyrim. And when I do that quest line, where you can become a werewolf, I felt uneasy and with a little nauseous, because that Skyrim werewolf looked uncanny to the beast I had seen a few months prior, enough that it gave me flashbacks and I started to cry. I never told anyone else about that night, and I can't even play Skyrim no more. I'm telling you, that creature in Skyrim looked just like what we saw at the window. It makes me sick. It makes me want to vomit to my stomach to even think about what I seen that night. It wasn't from the smell that made me want to vomit, but just from the pure fear that it put into me seeing something like that, knowing that it exists. When you hear things that go bump in the night, or you're sitting in your front room and your mom and dad just have the screen door there with the little bitty lock on it, I now know what's out there in the dark at night, and it can rip through that door in no time and snatch you up and kill your whole family. We take things for granted, and we trust little locks that would never work. I'm surprised more people aren't attacked and killed, but maybe they are, and maybe it's just blamed on something else. I hope you've enjoyed this encounter. I know one thing for sure. I will never go back into the bush, because I know what lives there, Mike. I hope you guys enjoyed that encounter. I enjoyed that from Australia. It sounds to me like you guys had a really, really bad encounter. A really scary encounter. It seems like Girl Scout, Boy Scout camping areas with children and stuff seem to be pretty popular areas for these things to hang out. I still believe there's an attraction to children. And I think y'all are lucky. I think it probably did come back that night to take a child. And those geese very well might have saved your all's lives. But yeah, that's a scary encounter, and I think y'all were lucky that everybody made it out of there. Look at the Girl Scouts, you know, here in Oklahoma. We had some evil people do some bad things there also, and there's other things that were said to be there. So be careful when you're at camping spots. Until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner. And thank you so much for your support and smashing that like button, and I look forward to reading your comments.